David, is there any country that has best chances for people to be admitted in Canada? And then, well, I leave you with that question because I have another one.
Sure. Once again, Canada takes part in international agreements, and there are 7 international agreements that it has with which include many countries. For example, the obvious one is which Mexico and US are part of, and that's what used to be known as NAFTA and now is known as CUSMA, Canada, US, Mexico Agreement. And that's an agreement. There are agreements with Colombia, agreements with Korea, and agreements with the European conglomerate of countries. So we have many agreements which allow for easier entry of workers, and it depends on what kind of work it is and depends on what profession it is. And there are investor options and trader options. So it depends on, for example, I'll talk about CUSMA. There are over 60 professional categories, mainly in the medical, scientific, IT, lawyers, accountants, management consultants, scientists. There's 60 of these where it is easier to come in from Mexico or the United States into Canada to work. All you need is a letter from the employer. The employer doesn't have to advertise, doesn't have to look for Canadians. Very easy. So it does matter where you're coming from and whether Canada has an agreement with that country for expedited entry. So in answer to your question, yes, it does depend on where you come from.
Okay, thank you. And another question, what the expectation for someone over 40 years old can have, which hopes to come to Canada?
That's a good question, Maria. And, you know, in the old days before like I said, before the rules changed, it used to be 49 used to be the cutoff age. You know, if you had a master's degree and you were over the age of 49, usually you can come to Canada, you could come. But now, as I said, the graphics has changed. It's gone lower. So they favor people between 18 and 35. And so if you're 40 and over 45, you get 0 points for age. So that is when I have to strategize with the person in front of me, and we have to look at various different options on how to increase the points because points have dropped due to age. And there's only basically 2 ways to increase the points. One is by finding a job in Canada, and secondly, by going to school and then getting a job. And let me just say that I have often recommended going to school for even older people. Just because you're young doesn't mean that's the only time you can go to school. And that has worked because people return to school, and there are certain programs whereby if you graduate with a master's in very specialized programs, simply by graduating from one of the British Columbia universities with a specific master's program allows you to apply for permanent residence because those jobs are in such high demand. So if you're older, don't rule out going back to school, and don't rule out having to find a job. I haven't mentioned business, but there are business methods also for people who are older to come into Canada if you have substantial wealth and you do want to invest money in a business here. That is also open.
That's great. Thank you very much, David. Well, one last question. Some people have asked me, they are living in the States. What are their chances of coming? They are not American citizens.
Right.
They are mostly people who brought me from Latin American countries.
Right.
And what recommendation do you have for them?
Once again, the immigration regulations and rules are relevant to whether you're a citizen of that country or whether you are there on some other status, whether, for example, in the US on an H-1B or an F-1, or you're on a business visa. You know, we look at everyone what we want here in Canada is that you have status in the country where you are living. In other words, if you are going to make an application for the United States, that's fine if you're living there, but you're not a citizen. That's all right. We look at what are the credentials, what avenue can we use, who's going to hire you, what school are you going to go to, what money do you have. The problem becomes when you don't have status, and I'm quite familiar, and I've had many, many calls from people who happen to be in the United States, and obviously they have no status.
Yeah.
They've been there for years and years and years, and they've been under the wire, and they're getting very nervous, especially in the last 4 years with the previous administration.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to deal with people like that very carefully. The only time that you can make an application, for example, in the United States, and you have no status, is if you were, when you first came to the United States, you came in legally for at least 1 year.
Mm-hmm.
You may be out of status now, but that first entry has to be legal. Sometimes that doesn't happen. And people say, well, I was brought in by my parents. I don't know. We came across the border. If they came in through that route, they cannot make their application without some complication, because what the immigration department says is, if you're making the application, your application must go through Mexico City, for example, or must go through Nicaragua or wherever you're from, or Guatemala. That is the consulate, and there may be an interview. So you can see what is going to happen. If the person is here or in the US illegally and they have to go for an interview back to Mexico, they may have cut off their life in the US forever because they will not be able to return to the US. So these things have to be thought out very, very carefully as to how it's going to be done, because you would only have one chance, and it better be the right choice, because it could be a one-way trip. So very careful, very hard decisions to make there.
David, there are many people who offer advice, or they tell people they can guarantee them they will find a job for them in Canada. And I keep telling people the only legal foundation of information is in the Canadian website. That's right. And the immigration lawyers like yourself, and who are all listed under the Law Society. Is that correct?
That's right. That's right.
What recommendation would you give to people to don't get frustrated, to don't get ripped off with other people trying to take advantage of their willingness to come to Canada?
Maria, that is a very, very good question, and I'm glad you've asked that. It is very, very important, once again, to do everything through the correct method. There are consultants, there are individuals who make all sorts of promises by asking an extraordinary amount of money, which they somehow share with the employer or just to guarantee a job. These are all illegal methods if you are being asked for a substantial amount of money to arrange for employment with an employer that you do not even know. Any legitimate legal avenue must be followed, and if you are being hired, then you must know that employer yourself. How did you find that job? Did that employer find you? Sometimes it is very suspect if there's a third party involved and saying, oh, I can find you a job. That is not how jobs are usually found. If you, as the person coming to Canada, have found your employer and the employer, and you have a connection, now we know there's been a one-to-one connection. That's how jobs are found. If you do have someone who says that I have a job for you. I would look very carefully as to who that person is, what their track record is, what their qualifications are, how the money is going to be funneled. Why is that amount of money being asked? How does that money go to the employer? Very important questions. In the end, I advise everyone to use an immigration lawyer, please. Not a consultant. Use an immigration lawyer who is authorized by the Law Society of the province, who is licensed, and who you can check on to say there is no problem with this lawyer. That is the only person you should trust.
Thank you, David. I tell that to people, but coming from you, make it legal and professional.
Yes.
Maybe last question. Is there any province that it's easier to emigrate than others in Canada?
I wouldn't say easier or harder. I think it really depends on, the more of the people emigrate to Ontario, British Columbia, and Quebec. The only distinction I would make is that with Quebec, it has different rules. So if you're French speaking, yes, Quebec may be a better place for you. But otherwise, you have to look at all of the different programs. And sometimes the government brings in programs that look a lot easier for Eastern Canada. And those programs get filled and it then becomes harder there. So I think it really depends first on the individual. Where would you like to go in Canada? What have you heard? So the most popular provinces are, of course, Ontario, British Columbia, and Quebec. That is, most of the people, half the immigrants go to Ontario because that's where the bigger population is. 30% of the people go to British Columbia and about 20% to Quebec. So, and the other provinces are smaller. You have to ask, if you're thinking about Canada, where would I be comfortable? Am I more comfortable at where there are fewer people, rural area, or do I want to be in a city where I've got people of my own culture and I can connect with and I can speak my language? Those are some of the issues that, really help. It really depends on your own network too and your own cultural background. When you're moving to a new country, it is very, very helpful to have people who have gone through that same experience, speak the language, and can guide you, assist you in the transition into a new country. So that is what I would suggest should be the first consideration. Where are my people?
Yeah, thank you, David. I started this because what moved me to do this is that I met so many immigrants, and I realized all of us, we go through the same process of adjustment, right? And I said, if we share our experiences, it's gonna make you feel better and adjust faster, because I was also very young when I came to Canada, and it was still hard. Well, I appreciate your time.
Yeah. I really appreciate you doing what you're doing, because the service that you're providing is so essential for people who are on the outside looking, and because it is so confusing when you look at immigration, because there's so much information, there's so many web forms, there's so many websites how does it apply to me? But what you're doing is very, very important for people to get the right information.
Information. That's what I want to say.
And know where to go before they take that very, very important step. Very important step, which is both time and money. And
exactly.
And so what you're doing is very useful. Thank you. Thank you for your service.
Thank you, David. Thank you for your friendship, for your time. For whoever doesn't know, lawyer's time is very expensive in Canada. So we really, really appreciate David's knowledge and generosity. And if it's okay with you, I will put at the end of our video the address and contact information for both of your offices.
No problem.
Victoria and Vancouver.
Thank you. Thank you, Maria, and all the best to your viewers and to yourself and to your family.
Thank you, David. The same to you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Nice seeing you. Bye-bye.